The morning I crossed into the province, the customs officer smiled at me and I knew something was wrong. Not because the smile was false. Because it was the third identical smile I had seen in 40 minutes, performed with the same width, the same duration, the same micropause before the eyes caught up with the mouth. The woman at the fuel station had done it. The man at the checkpoint barrier had done it. Now this officer, leaning into my truck window with his clipboard, did it again. Same smile. Same timing. Same invisible seam where the expression assembled itself a quarter-second too late. I said nothing. I handed over my transport license, my cargo manifest, my veterinary certification for the seed stock in the trailer. He examined each document with what appeared to be careful attention, but his eyes moved at a fixed speed across every page regardless of density. He spent the same amount of time on the single-line certification stamp as he did on the 4-page cargo breakdown. "Welcome to Pereira Province," he said. "Duration of stay? 4 days. Delivery and consultation. Purpose of visit? Agricultural supply. I have a contract with the Vallejo Cooperative." He wrote something on his clipboard. I could see the page from my angle. He was writing the same short word repeatedly in a neat vertical column. I couldn't read it. He tore off a pink slip, handed it to me, and stepped back from the truck with the smile again. The exact smile. I drove through. I am a seed merchant. I have been running improved maize and sorghum varieties into rural cooperatives across 3 countries for 11 years. I work alone. I own my truck, my inventory, my accounts. I am not employed by any government, any corporation, any NGO. I chose this work after I left my son's life, which is a way of saying I chose a kind of work that keeps me moving through places where I cannot be found by the version of myself that failed him. He was 9 when I left. He would be 22 now. I have not spoken to him in 13 years, and the reason is not complicated. I was a drunk who drove the car that killed his mother's ability to walk, and when she told me to leave, the most honest thing I ever did was listen. That is not the story. But it sits underneath everything I do, the way a cracked foundation sits under a house that still stands. You learn to walk softly. Pereira Province is in the interior of a country I will not name because what I am going to describe is still happening there, and I am not confident that naming it would help anyone more than it would hurt me. It is a large province, roughly the size of a small European country, with a population that the last reliable census placed at 800,000. Agricultural, mostly. River systems feeding a broad alluvial plain. Good soil. 2 mid-sized towns and several hundred villages connected by roads that are either paved and excellent or dirt and terrible, with very little in between. I had delivered to Pereira twice before, both times without incident. The cooperative at Vallejo was competent and paid on time. My contact there was a woman named Dora Cisneros, who managed procurement and had a dry, tired authority that I respected. She knew seeds. She did not waste my time. This trip, Dora had not answered my confirmation calls. 3 attempts over 2 weeks. The cooperative's main line rang through to a recording that thanked me for calling and provided no option to leave a message. I drove down anyway because I had already purchased the stock, because the contract was signed, and because Dora's silence could mean anything from a dead phone line to a regional outage. Infrastructure in the interior was unreliable. I had once driven 400 kilometers to deliver seed to a cooperative whose radio had been out for a month because a bird had nested in the antenna housing. The road from the border checkpoint to Vallejo was 170 kilometers of good asphalt. I had driven it before and remembered it as a working road. Trucks, motorcycles, cattle trailers, the occasional overloaded bus trailing diesel smoke. Vendors at intersections selling fruit and water. Dogs. Children at the verges of villages. This time the road was empty. Not reduced. Empty. I drove 170 kilometers in 2 hours and 40 minutes and did not see a single other vehicle. I passed through 4 villages and each one was intact. Houses standing, doors closed, some with laundry on lines, but I saw no one in any of them. No movement. No dogs. No sound when I slowed and opened my window. Just the laundry moving slightly in a wind that smelled like cut grass, and underneath, something faintly chemical that I could not identify. I stopped at the 3rd village. I got out of the truck. I stood in the road for 5 minutes. The silence was not absolute. I could hear the wind, insects, the tick of my engine cooling. But beneath that, the village was empty the way a theater is empty after the audience leaves. The structures were scenery. The function had departed. I got back in the truck. I was not frightened. I was confused, and confusion in my line of work usually has a banal explanation. A regional holiday I had missed, a local political event that pulled everyone to the capital, a road closure that rerouted traffic. I continued to Vallejo. Vallejo is a town of roughly 12,000 people. It has a central plaza, a municipal building, a market, a school, 2 churches, and the agricultural cooperative where Dora works out of a cinder block office with a tin roof and a filing cabinet she has threatened to shoot. I arrived at 1:30 in the afternoon. The town was not empty. The town was full of people I had never seen before, doing things that did not make sense. The plaza was occupied. Men and women walked its perimeter in a slow, consistent circuit. They were dressed in ordinary clothes, work shirts, cotton trousers, print dresses, sandals, but the clothes did not fit them well. Sleeves too long. Waistbands cinched with cord where a belt should be. A woman in a dress clearly sized for someone much larger had rolled the cuffs of the sleeves into thick bands at her wrists, and the rolling was so uniform on both sides that it looked machine-folded. They walked. They did not speak to each other. Occasionally one would stop, look at a building, and then resume walking. The stops were not random. I sat in my parked truck at the edge of the plaza for 20 minutes and watched a man stop, look at the bakery, resume walking, and then 7 minutes later a different woman stopped at the same point and looked at the same bakery for the same duration before resuming. I counted 43 people visible from my position. None of them looked at my truck. I went to the cooperative. The building was open. The lights were on. Dora's office was occupied by a man I did not recognize. He was sitting at her desk, and when I came through the door he gave me the smile. The same smile from the border. The same assembly. The same quarter-second lag. I have a delivery contract with Dora Cisneros, I said. Seed stock. Maize and sorghum. She should be expecting me. Dora Cisneros is on administrative leave, the man said. His voice was normal. His Spanish was clean, educated, with the slight formality of someone speaking a second language at near native. Proficiency. I am handling her responsibilities. You can unload the delivery here. I need to see Dora to confirm the varietal specifications. She placed a custom order. The order is confirmed. Standard terms. It's not a standard order. She requested 2 specific hybrid lines that require planting guidance. I need to walk her through the germination protocol. He looked at me. The smile did not return. His face settled into an expression of polite administrative patience that reminded me, with a physical shock of recognition, of my father. Not in feature. In the way the face was being used. As a tool to close a conversation. Dora Cisneros is on administrative leave, he said again, with the exact same intonation. Not similar. Exact. I had spent enough years listening to people repeat lies to recognize the difference between someone choosing the same words twice and someone producing a recording. Where are the cooperative members? I asked. The board. Fernando Ruiz. Marta Delgado. Any of them. Administrative restructuring. I can sign for the delivery. I left the building. I did not unload the seed. Something was wrong in the way that a room is wrong when the furniture has been replaced with replicas that are slightly too large, the dimensions almost right, the function preserved, the reality gone. I drove to the municipal building. It was open. The lights were on. A woman sat at the front desk. She smiled at me. I asked to speak with the mayor. She told me he was in a meeting. I asked when the meeting would end. She said administrative scheduling would provide that information. I asked where administrative scheduling was located. She directed me to a room down the hall. In that room, a man told me the mayor was available by appointment. I asked for an appointment. He said the scheduling system was being updated. I asked when it would be updated. He directed me back to the front desk. This loop was not accidental. It was architecture. I recognized it because I had once spent 3 days trying to get an import license renewed in a country whose entire customs bureaucracy had been designed to ensure that no application could ever reach a human being with the authority to approve it. That system was corrupt and intentional. This one felt different. It felt like something performing the idea of government the way a language model produces the shape of a sentence without knowing what the words mean. I sat in my truck in the plaza and called Dora's personal number. It rang. Someone answered. Hello. It was not Dora. It was a man's voice, neutral and careful. I'm looking for Dora Cisneros. This is her number. Dora Cisneros is on administrative leave. I hung up. I called the National Agricultural Registry. The call connected. A woman answered with the name of the agency. I asked about the Vallejo Cooperative's current registration status. She put me on hold. I waited 11 minutes. A man picked up and told me the cooperative was active and in good standing. I asked for the name of the current managing officer. He said Dora Cisneros. I told him I was in Vallejo and Dora was not here. He said the registry showed her as current. I asked if there had been any administrative changes filed for Pereira Province in the last 90 days. He went quiet. Not hold quiet. The silence of someone who had stopped breathing. Sir, he said, Pereira Province is current and in good standing. Is there anything else I can help you with? He hung up before I could answer. I am not a brave man. I am a man who runs. I have been running for 13 years from a house where my son ate cereal in the morning and watched me with eyes that already knew I would leave. But I have also learned, in the blunt education of working alone in places where systems fail, that the moment you identify a wrong thing and choose to keep moving toward it, you have already made the only decision that matters. Everything after is just your body catching up with what your mind has committed to. I did not leave Vallejo. I parked my truck behind the cooperative building, locked the cab, and walked the town on foot. What I found was this: Vallejo was staffed. Every building that should have been occupied was occupied. The school had people in it, visible through windows, sitting at desks. The market had vendors behind stalls, with produce arranged in neat rows. The clinic had a woman in a white coat visible through the front window. The churches were open, with figures seated in pews. But the school had no children. The vendors were not selling, no one approached the stalls, and the produce, when I walked close enough to see, was real but old. Softening mangoes. Onions with dry papery skin crumbling at the stem. Rice in open sacks that had a faintly stale smell. The clinic woman was sitting at her desk without papers, without a computer, without any visible equipment. She was looking at the wall. The churches had figures in pews who were not praying. They were sitting with their hands flat on their thighs, facing forward, motionless. I went into the market. I picked up a mango. The woman behind the stall smiled at me. "How much?" I said. "Good afternoon," she said. "Welcome." "How much for the mango?" "The market is open. Please take what you need." "I want to pay." "How much?" She looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as a system encountering an input it was not designed to process. Not confusion. Not hostility. A kind of gentle, stalled blankness, like a calculator asked to divide by a concept. "The market is open," she said again. I put the mango down. My hands were steady. My pulse was not. I walked out of the market and stood in the shade of a building and breathed slowly until my heart rate came down, because I had realized two things simultaneously. The first was that the people in Vallejo were not the people who were supposed to be in Vallejo. They were replacements. Not in the science fiction sense. Not clones, not robots, not aliens wearing skin. They were human beings. They breathed. They blinked. They had body odor and chapped lips and the physical specificity of real people who had lived real lives. But they were not from here. They did not know how to do the things they were pretending to do, and someone had put them here and given them instructions that were detailed enough to fill a town but not detailed enough to run one. The second thing I realized was that no one was watching me. In every police state I had ever worked in, and I had worked in several, surveillance was a presence you could feel. Eyes. Cameras. The man on the corner who was always on the corner. The car that appeared twice. In Vallejo, there was nothing. No cameras. No security. No one following me. The people in the plaza did not track my movement. The man in Dora's office had not asked for my identification. The border officer had let me through with a cursory document check that he had not actually read. Whatever had happened to Vallejo was not being guarded. It was being maintained. There is a difference. You guard something that might be taken. You maintain something that is already functioning as intended. I walked to the edge of town. The residential streets were the same. Houses occupied by people who sat in chairs or stood in kitchens or moved between rooms with the purposeful vagueness of actors in a rehearsal where no one has explained the plot. I saw a man watering a garden with a hose. The water ran across bare dirt, where nothing was planted. He watered with steady, even sweeps. He had been watering for a long time. The ground was saturated and the water pooled and ran into the road, and he continued his sweeps without adjustment. I found the edge of the residential area, where the town gave way to agricultural land. The fields beyond were planted. I could see maize at a reasonable growth stage, maybe 6 weeks in. The rows were straight. The irrigation channels were wet. Someone was maintaining the agriculture, and doing it competently. Better than competently. The field layout was professional, the spacing correct, the irrigation timing evident in the soil moisture gradient. Whoever was farming this land knew what they were doing. I walked along the field margin for half a kilometer. I found a maintenance shed. It was unlocked. Inside were tools, fertilizer bags, seed packets, irrigation schedules pinned to a corkboard. The schedules were typed, not handwritten. They covered 6 months, with daily tasks, water volumes, application rates. They were technically excellent. They were also written in a format I recognized, because I had helped develop it. The seed packets were mine. My company. My varietal codes. My lot numbers. But the quantities were wrong. The schedule called for a volume of seed that was 4 times what I had contracted to deliver. Someone had ordered dramatically more than Dora's contract specified, and they had done it using my catalog system, my varietal naming conventions, and batch numbers that did not exist in my inventory. Someone was running Vallejo's agriculture using a version of my supply chain that I had not built. I took photographs. I took the schedules off the corkboard and folded them into my pocket. Then I heard an engine. A truck came up the field road. White. Government plates. It stopped 30 meters from the shed and 2 men got out. They were not smiling. They were not performing. They moved with the economical directness of people who had a task and the authority to complete it. One was young, military fit, with a short haircut and a sidearm visible on his belt. The other was older, civilian clothes, carrying a leather portfolio. The older man approached me. He did not smile. "You are the seed contractor," he said. "Not a question. I have a delivery contract with the Vallejo Cooperative. Your delivery is accepted. You can unload at the cooperative warehouse. We have someone who can help with the physical transfer. I need to speak with Dora Cisneros. Dora Cisneros has been relocated. Not administrative leave. Relocated. The word landed differently. It had weight. It had finality. And it was the first honest thing anyone in this province had said to me. Relocated where? That information is not available to contractors. What happened to the people in this town? He looked at me the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray, with interest, assessment, and no emotional investment in what he sees. The people in this town are in this town, he said. You can see them. Those are not the same people. The population of Vallejo is current and in good standing. There it was again. The phrase from the phone call. Current and in good standing. A status marker. An institutional classification applied to human beings the way it would be applied to a license or a registration. I am going to leave, I said. I am going to take my seed stock and leave. Your delivery is accepted. The contract will be paid. You should unload and then you are free to go. I'm not unloading anything. The young man's hand did not move toward his sidearm. He did not need to. His posture was the message. The older man opened his portfolio and removed a document. It was a copy of my delivery contract. At the bottom, beneath Dora's signature, was a second signature I did not recognize, countersigned by a ministry seal I had never seen. The ministry was identified by an acronym, for letters, that I did not know. Your contract is with the province, the older man said. The cooperative is the delivery point. The terms are unchanged. Please unload your stock and file your completion receipt as normal. He put the document away, and they both got back in the truck and drove toward town. I stood in the field margin with the smell of good soil and growing maize around me, and I understood that I had been expected. Not watched. Expected. The way a system expects an input. I was not a threat to be managed. I was a function to be executed. I was the seed delivery, and the system needed the seed delivery, and everything I had encountered, the border smile, the empty road, the staff town, the man in Dora's office, was infrastructure arranged to ensure that the delivery occurred on schedule. The horror of that was not that I was in danger. It was that I was useful. I went back to my truck. I sat in the cab. I ate a protein bar for my supplies and drank water, and I thought about my son. I thought about him because when you are confronted with a system that has replaced an entire population and is running the empty shape of their lives with substitutes, and your response is not to scream or run but to sit in your truck and calculate your options, you are forced to recognize something about yourself that you have been avoiding. I had spent 13 years moving through broken places, delivering seeds to cooperatives that existed in the margins of states that did not care about their people, and I had done it not because I was heroic, but because it was a way of living that required no attachment. No roots. No son waiting at a table. No woman in a wheelchair filing divorce papers with a lawyer who looked at me the way I deserved to be looked at. I was already the kind of man this system needed. Someone who arrived, performed a function, and left. The question was whether I was going to leave. I unloaded the seed stock. It took 2 hours. The man from Dora's office and 2 of the plaza walkers came to help carry the sacks into the warehouse. They worked with the mechanical competence of people who had been shown how to carry a sack, but had never done it before this week. Their grips were wrong. They held the sacks too high, hugging them against their chests instead of settling the weight on their shoulders. But they did not complain, and they did not stop, and they stacked the sacks in the pattern I indicated without error. While we worked, I talked to them. Not about the town. About the work. You need to keep these sacks off the floor. Moisture will destroy the germination rate. The man from Dora's office nodded. Pallets, he said. Yes. Wooden pallets. Elevated storage. We have pallets. The hybrid lines, the ones in the blue-tagged sacks, those need to go in within 72 hours of delivery. If you wait longer, Viability drops. Do you have your planting schedule? He went to the desk and produced a printed schedule. It was the same format as the one I had found in the field shed. Professionally formatted, technically accurate, and calling for 4 times the seed I had delivered. This schedule requires more stock than I brought. Additional deliveries are arranged. Through who? The supply chain. I am the supply chain. There is no other contracted supplier for these varietals in this region. He looked at me. No smile. No blankness. Something closer to recognition, not of me as a person, but of the problem I represented. An input that was asking questions the system had not anticipated. Additional deliveries are arranged, he said again. I left the warehouse. I drove to the edge of town and parked on the road that led back to the border. I should have driven straight through. 4 hours to the checkpoint, through the barrier, out of the province, file a report with whoever would listen, and never come back. But I kept thinking about the farming. The fields were real. The crops were growing. The irrigation was correct. The schedules were precise. Someone in this province understood agriculture at a level that was not amateur, and they were scaling it dramatically beyond what the original cooperative had ever attempted. The Vallejo cooperative had farmed maybe 200 hectares. The fields I had seen suggested 4 or 5 times that. And the seed orders, the ones on the schedules, implied a planting program that would cover the entire alluvial plain. Someone was using the emptied province to build a massive agricultural operation from scratch, staffing it with people who had been trained just enough to maintain the visible surface of a functioning town, while the real work happened in the fields with professional grade planning and logistics. I turned the truck around. I did not drive back into Vallejo. I took a farm track that ran parallel to the main road, heading east along the river. I drove for an hour. The fields continued, and they grew. Hectare after hectare of maize, sorghum, cassava, groundnut. All at various growth stages, suggesting rolling planting over several months. All professionally maintained. I passed 3 more maintenance sheds, all identical, all with the same typed schedules. Then I found the camp. It was not hidden. It was simply not on any road. Set back 200 meters from the river, in a cleared area surrounded by mature plantings, was a compound of prefabricated buildings, the modular, stackable kind used by mining operations and military forward bases. 20 or 30 units. Generator arrays. Water treatment. A communications mast. And people. Real people. People who moved with purpose, who talked to each other, who carried tools and clipboards and wore clothing that fit. I stopped the truck at a distance and watched through binoculars. The compound was organized around a central building, larger than the others, with a satellite dish on the roof. People moved between buildings carrying crates, equipment, soil samples in labeled bags. I counted 60 or 70 individuals. Some wore civilian work clothes. Some wore the olive drab of military surplus without insignia. A few wore white laboratory coats. This was the real operation. The town was the skin. This was the body. I lowered the binoculars and saw a woman standing 50 meters from my truck, on the track, watching me. She was tall, thin, sunburned, with her hair pulled back and a radio clipped to her belt. She wore work boots and a faded denim shirt. She did not smile. She raised one hand, not a wave, not a warning. A signal to wait. She walked to my truck. I rolled down the window. "You should not be on this track," she said. "It's a farm road. I'm a seed contractor. I know who you are. Your truck was logged at the border. Then you know my delivery is complete. I'm leaving. You're driving east. The border is west." I had nothing to say to that. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Come with me. There's someone who wants to talk to you." I should not have gone. I know that. But I went, because the woman's face was the first face I had seen in Pereira province that was not performing anything. It was tired. It was real. And it was afraid, in the specific way that a competent person is afraid when they understand exactly what they are part of. The compound was cleaner than I expected. The prefab units were well maintained, the paths between them graveled, the generator humming at a steady pitch that suggested good fuel supply and recent service. The woman led me to the central building. Inside, it was a working operations center. Maps on the walls. Agricultural planning charts. Soil analysis reports. Satellite imagery of the province marked with colored overlays showing planting zones, irrigation networks, infrastructure. A man was waiting in a small office at the back. He was perhaps 60, compact, with reading glasses and the particular stillness of someone who has held authority long enough to stop performing it. He gestured to a chair. I sat. "You found us faster than expected," he said. "I wasn't looking for you. I was looking for Dora Cisneros." His expression shifted. Not guilt. Recognition. The look of someone hearing a name they have filed away. Dora is alive. She is not in the province. Where is she? She was resettled. Along with everyone else. 800,000 people were resettled. Yes. By whom? He took off his glasses and cleaned them with a cloth from his desk. The gesture was so ordinary, so professorially domestic, that it made the content of our conversation feel insane. "There was a soil study," he said, 14 years ago. A ministry survey that found the alluvial plain of Pereira province had a particular combination of depth, mineral content, and water access that made it one of the most productive potential agricultural zones on the continent. The study was classified. The province was flagged for strategic development. The question was how to develop it. You removed the population. The population was an obstacle to a rational land use plan. 800,000 people farming small plots with traditional methods on soil that could produce 5 to 10 times the yield with consolidated, technologically managed agriculture. The economic calculation was not complicated. You can't relocate 800,000 people. You can if you do it slowly. Over 12 years. Reclassification of land tenure. Withdrawal of services. Closure of schools and clinics. Economic pressure. Incentivized relocation programs. The last 30,000 were moved in the final 18 months under a public health emergency that was declared, managed, and resolved entirely within the provincial administration. No national coverage. No international attention. The province was never important enough for anyone to notice. I sat with this. 12 years. A slow, administrative erasure of an entire population, conducted through the ordinary mechanisms of governance. No violence. No troops. No camps. Just the patient, procedural withdrawal of everything that makes a place livable until the people leave because staying is no longer possible. The people in the town, I said. The ones walking the plaza. Maintenance staff. The towns need to appear occupied for satellite monitoring, census verification, and the occasional contractor. He looked at me. Like you. They're not very convincing. They don't need to be. They need to be present. A satellite sees a town with people in it. A census query returns a population number. A contractor delivers seed and files a completion receipt. The system is not designed to withstand investigation. It is designed to not attract it. And the farming is real, is the point. Everything else, the town, the people, the maintained roads, is infrastructure to support the agricultural program. We are producing at a scale and efficiency that the original population could never have achieved. The yields go into national strategic reserves. The country's food security index has improved measurably in the last 4 years. That is not incidental. That is the justification. He said this without pride, without defensiveness, with the flat, exhausted honesty of a man who had made a calculation years ago and now lived inside the result. "You're telling me this," I said. "Why?" "Because you are going to leave this province, and you are going to have to decide what to do with what you have seen. And I want you to understand the full scope of what you would be disrupting. I'm a seed merchant. You are a seed merchant who just drove through a depopulated province, identified the replacement program, found the operational compound, and is now sitting in my office. You are not a stupid man. And you are, unfortunately, a necessary one. Your seed varieties are the best available for this soil type and climate. The agricultural program was designed around your product line. Losing your supply chain would set us back 2 growing seasons." There it was. The reason I was sitting in this office instead of in a ditch. I was inventory. I was a varietal specification in someone's planting schedule. The system needed me the way it needed water and phosphorus, as an input, recurring and reliable. "I want to see Dora," I said. "That is not possible." "Then I want confirmation she is alive. I want to speak with her." He considered this for a long time. Then he opened a desk drawer, removed a phone, and dialed a number. He spoke briefly in a language I did not understand, not Spanish, not Portuguese, something I could not place, and handed me the phone. "Hello," I said. "Who is this?" Dora's voice. Unmistakable. The clipped, skeptical cadence of a woman who had managed difficult men and bad budgets her entire life. "It's me. The seed man." A silence. "Then, you should not be there. I have your delivery. Leave the seed. Leave the province. Do not come back." "Dora, what happened?" "What happened is what always happens. The land was worth more than the people on it. Now please, for the love of God, deliver the seed and go home." The line went dead. The man took the phone back. She is alive, he said. She is provided for. They all are. The resettlement communities are functional. They are not luxurious, but they are adequate. The ministry is not cruel. It is efficient. There is a difference. There is not as much of a difference as you think. He put his glasses back on. Probably not, he said. And for the first time I saw something behind the administrative composure. Not guilt exactly, but the specific weariness of a man who has argued himself into a position he cannot argue himself out of. I need you to continue your deliveries, he said. Quarterly, as contracted. The compensation will be significantly increased. The terms will be guaranteed for 10 years. And if I don't, then we source elsewhere and you lose the contract. That is all. We are not going to threaten you. You are not important enough to threaten. The program does not depend on any one supplier. It depends on the system, and the system will continue. He was right. That was the worst part. He was right, and we both knew it, and the knowledge sat between us like a document neither of us wanted to sign. I left the compound. The woman with the radio walked me back to my truck. We stood in the late afternoon light with the field stretching out around us, green and abundant and stolen. How long have you been here? I asked her. 3 years. What were you before? Agronomist. University of Santiago. I was recruited for a development project. They did not explain what had been developed. If I leave, someone worse takes my place and the soil suffers. She paused. That is what I tell myself. I don't know if it is true or if it is just the story that lets me sleep. I drove west. I reached the border at nightfall. The checkpoint officer smiled at me. I smiled back. It was not hard. I had been smiling at things I could not bear for 13 years. I filed my delivery receipt at the next town with internet access. I logged the completion in my system. I invoiced the cooperative at the standard rate. The payment arrived within 72 hours, along with a new contract, quarterly deliveries, 10-year term, compensation tripled. The contract came from the 4-letter ministry I had never heard of, countersigned with a seal I could not verify. I signed it. I signed it because Dora told me to deliver the seed and go home. I signed it because the agronomist was right. The crops were real and the food would feed real people and the system would continue with or without me. I signed it because the man in the office had shown me the shape of the operation and I had recognized it, not as something alien or monstrous but as something utterly familiar. The patient, procedural removal of inconvenient people from valuable land. It had happened on every continent, in every century. It was happening now in places I had delivered seed to before without asking who had been there first. But those are the reasons I gave myself. The real reason is uglier, and I will say it because I have spent 13 years driving away from the truth, and it has got me nowhere. I signed it because the system offered me what I had been looking for since I left my son, a way to be useful without being present. A function without a relationship. A role in a machine that did not require me to be a person, only a supplier. And that was exactly the kind of life I had built. A life of deliveries and departures, of contracts completed and people left behind. And the province had recognized me for what I was and had made a place for me inside itself. I have made 4 deliveries since that first trip. Each time the town is a little more convincing. The plaza walkers have learned to vary their routes. The market vendors can now make change. The man in Dora's office has been replaced by a woman who asks technically competent questions about seed storage. The performance is improving. The province is learning to be a province. The fields are extraordinary. I have never seen soil produce like this. The yields the agronomist showed me on my third visit were beyond anything I thought possible for these varietals in this climate. She was genuinely proud, and I understood her pride, because the work was real even if everything around it was not. On my last delivery, I drove through the village where I had first stopped and found it occupied. A family was living in one of the houses, a man, a woman, 2 children. They were eating dinner at a table visible through a window. The children were laughing. The sound was so specific, so irreducibly human, that I stopped the truck and sat listening for a long time. They could have been maintenance staff, performers, replacements given a more detailed script. But the children were laughing the way children laugh, not on cue, not in rhythm, but in the helpless surplus way that children laugh when something is genuinely funny to them. And I thought, maybe some of the resettled people had been allowed to return. Maybe the system had softened. Maybe the province was filling back up with real people, slowly, the way of field greens after planting. Or maybe I needed to believe that. Maybe the system had gotten good enough to produce laughter that sounded real, and I was now too deep inside it to tell the difference. I think about my son. I think about him more now than I did in the first years, which is the opposite of what I expected. I carry his absence the way the province carries the absence of its people, by filling the space with activity, with function, with the visible mechanics of a life that is technically operational. My truck runs. My contracts are fulfilled. My accounts are solvent. From the outside, from a satellite, from a census query, I am current and in good standing. Last week I looked up my son's name online. He is a teacher. He teaches agricultural science at a rural school in a province 3 countries away from Pereira. He has a photograph on the school's website. He has my hands. He has his mother's eyes. He looks like someone who has built a life in the space I left empty, the way a forest grows back after a fire. Not the same forest, but a forest, real and rooted and his own. I could call him. I have his school's phone number. I could call and say, I am your father, and I have been gone for 13 years, and I am sorry, and I am currently delivering seed to a province whose entire population was erased so that the soil could be used more efficiently, and I am complicit in this because it is easier to be complicit than to be a person, and I would like to stop being this. I could say that. Instead, I am loading my truck for the 5th delivery. The contract is clear. The route is mapped. The border officer will smile at me. The fields will be green. The system will continue, and I will continue inside it, because that is what I chose, and choosing is the one thing no system did for me. The mango I picked up in the market that first day, I still have it. It sat on my dashboard for the drive home, and then I put it on my kitchen counter, and I have not touched it since. It is black now, shriveled, collapsing into itself. It smells sweet in the way that decay smells sweet. I should throw it away. I keep it because it is the only thing I took from Vallejo that the system did not authorize, and because it is rotting in a way that proves it was once alive, and because some mornings I look at it and think, that is what an honest thing looks like when you refuse to let it go. I have my son's phone number written on a piece of paper in my wallet. I have not called. I am not sure I will. But I carry it the way I carry the mango, the way I carry the schedules I photographed, the way I carry the sound of those children laughing through a window in a village that should have been empty, as evidence. Not of what was done. Of what I chose not to do. The 5th delivery is tomorrow. I will cross the border. The officer will smile. I will smile back. The seed will go into the warehouse, into the fields, into the soil that was worth more than the people who lived on it. And the province will continue to become more real, and I will continue to drive through it, and the distance between what I am doing and what I could be doing will grow another season wider. This is not a ghost story. There are no ghosts in Pereira province. That is the problem. They were all removed through proper channels.